Hello and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia, coming to you after a huge win in Kansas City. The third coldest game in Chargers history. That doesn't surprise me. Obviously, it doesn't get that cold in LA, which just makes this win that much more impressive. You know, so many backups playing on both sides made for such an ugly game. So many penalties, miscommunications, and obviously both defenses did a really good job. But the Chargers are a 10-win team. You know, to be in this spot after losing so many of their best players, Justin Herbert playing through a broken hand, this is a huge win. And to me, I gotta give so much credit to Jim Harbaugh for getting a team that can still believe in themselves after all of this. I don't think it can be understated how much of a culture win this was. And what an honor to take out the defending AFC champions right after taking out the defending Super Bowl champions, right? I mean, obviously, you really took out the Chiefs because they're out for the season. No postseason chances for them anymore. Man, the mini movie is going to go crazy this week. That is going to be so cool to see. And it's very fitting that Derwin is able to pick off that throw targeting Kelce, who can't do anything about it, right? He's underthrown. Gardner Minshew, you could see in the play before, all he did was look at Kelce, and he was able to hit him and get a first down and keep that drive moving. And so the defense goes, yeah, we can't let that happen again. They say Derwin on Kelce, as it was meant to be. And Gardner Minshew, you know, for whatever reason, he saw Travis Kelce in double coverage and thought, yeah, there are no other options. Hey, that's what backup quarterbacks do. You just try to get the ball in the hands of your best player. Travis Kelce had proven way more reliable than every other receiver, but not against Derwin James, you know? So that was a fantastic job in that last drive. How many times are the Chargers defense going to get an interception to win the game? That was just incredible. Don't overlook the fact that they are winning an early morning game at a different time zone. Their preparation was a little bit different. They moved their practice times sooner and, you know, did what they could to handle it. And it looks like that's a problem we're not really going to have to deal with anymore. You know, obviously there are no easy games from here on out. There really weren't any easy games from 2 weeks ago, but this was an incredible performance from the defense. The two halves of the game felt very different. So I want to go through this game by half. In the first half, I want to start with the defense. Thule was having a game from the beginning. 2 sacks in the first half. By the end of the game, he got 9 pressures, which is just incredible. Derwin and Thule got that tackle for a loss. Perryman had some great tackles, playing so physical out there. He makes such a big difference. So no quarterback spy leads to the Mahomes touchdown. Obviously, that's a bit frustrating, but, you know, he took off running for a reason, and that's because his guys were covered and he was under pressure. You know, it's one of those things that obviously I'm sure Jesse Minter wished that he could have back, but they did use a QB spy in other situations, so they saw something that made them want to change the coverage in that situation. But, you know, that's the only touchdown that they allowed. So you do got to give the defense a lot of credit anyways. Some really good run stopping from the linebackers. You know, it doesn't feel like a team that before the bye you were going, man, they really can't stop the run. You know, that's not what this team feels like anymore. It feels like, oh, please run against this team. Please try. You know, if you run up the middle, the guys up the middle are a brick wall. It is going to be so hard to get past Deshaun Hand or Jamari Caldwell. You know, even on the outside, it's getting hard to get past Thule. It's hard to get past Mack. And, you know, that's been true. The defensive line did a great job taking advantage of these backup tackles and guards in there. Obviously, constant pressure from the edges. You know, like I said, a great Thule game. I do think that in the first half, the Chiefs' offense are a really good example of how much more creative the Chargers could be at dealing with pressure, especially in the passing game. Their backups are holding up a little bit better than the Chargers, especially in terms of the first half. Overall, by the end of the game, the Chargers actually got a higher pressure rate on the Chiefs than the Chiefs did to the Chargers, and I don't know if that's happened a single time this year, so you got to give the defensive line a lot of credit for that. The Chiefs offense in the first half, they really make it so that blitzing comes at a cost. You know, there's so many checkdowns, so many short pass options. Mahomes rarely has to choose between a 20-yard pass and throwing it out of bounds. Usually there are so many better, you know, up close options. They're really good at spreading a defense out. You know, probably the biggest issue with Greg Roman, I'm not going to get too much into the issues with Greg Roman today. I am going to talk about the offense, but I really am more so going to celebrate the defense since this is their win. Real quick on special teams, Keandre Lambert-Smith he's not the best returner, right? I think he could make a better a better future option than anyone else we have on the roster. You obviously saw that good return setting up the last drive. Deshaun Phillips is still making a lot of tackles. He has probably been the most consistent player on special teams outside of Cameron Dicker doing what Cameron Dicker does, obviously. But I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is showing some promise. Tony Jefferson also got a good tackle on Nico Remigio, I think is how you say that name. He's a good returner, although, he can't really get on the field otherwise. They had Ladd out there for the punt returns. He, I believe, didn't return any. He actually just, did fair catches. I understand why they do that. They want someone who's just going to go out there and definitely make the catch, and Ladd has some pretty sure hands in that situation, so I get it. I wish we had a better option than one of our best wide receivers, but it is what it is. Back to Keandre Lambert-Smith. Him getting that false start on a punt is really bad because stupid penalties like that, early in the year, that is why he couldn't get back on the field, because he would get on the field and get a penalty, and Harbaugh doesn't take kindly to that, especially not for rookies. He had 4 returns averaging 23 yards, which is not great overall, but because he showed that one good flash, I think he will get other chances. Darius Davis is probably going to be out for a while. I would be surprised if he's back before the postseason. But the one good return that KLS had led to the touchdown. That's happened multiple times with the one good return you get is a touchdown. And that makes sense because the field position is so important. It means if you're in the middle of the field as opposed to on your own 15, you can open up the playbook a little bit. You can afford to take a little more chances. And, you don't have to get as many first downs. You give the opposing defense fewer second and longs, fewer third and longs, and fewer opportunities to get after Justin Herbert. I think it's a really big deal to get good field position. So I hope that Keandre Lambert-Smith can continue to be a solid option for the Chargers, even if he isn't great on average. The flashes are there. And the last thing on special teams, Cameron Dicker, he's good as always. No surprise there. The offense in the first half, they went really hard at running the ball early. Kamani Vidal looked great. Run blocking up the middle was really bad, as always. Kamani Vidal still made it work a few times in that first drive, which is really impressive, but it's still, if we had better blocking up the middle, Kamani Vidal would be an incredible back. Scott Matlock has quietly become a really good lead blocker. I think he struggles a bit in pass protection still. When he's in motion, he's really hard for a linebacker or even an edge rusher to get past, to get after a rusher. So that's good to see. I love the extra lineman sets. Trevor Penning is really great at stealing the edge. He's really good in motion, and I think the Chargers have found a really good role for him. Even though obviously at one point they were hoping that he could be the starting left tackle, I think this is a good role for him, and I hope that they continue to have these 6 lineman, 7 lineman sets because it protects Justin Herbert. It still looks good in the run game, even though it's relatively predictable. When you can run the ball well, when they know you're going to run the ball, you are set up for success, and that's something that I like to see them do on first down. If they can refine it a bit, I think it could be a good third and short option. Anything to get Herbert out of those high injury risk situations. So we also saw Trevor Penning in for Mekhi Becton at right guard. I'm not sure why. I didn't see any evidence of an injury there. I think they just kind of trust Penning more in certain situations, and I'm curious to see what they do with that going forward. I'm curious if we're going to see Mekhi Becton on the injury report, if that'll reveal something. I love to see runs going to the right side and being successful, especially when it goes all the way to the sideline. Keep these linebackers honest. We've seen how defenses kind of shade to the Chargers left a little bit because the run blocking is just better on that side, and so the Chargers want to run to that side. So I like seeing them mix that up in a way that was successful. They ran so much on that first drive. I guess you can't hurt Justin Herbert if he never drops back to pass, right? So I get it. They barely let Herbert throw early on. It was a little frustrating that they don't roll him out to a side. That I think they had a planned rollout maybe twice all game. I'd like to see that be more common, especially to the right side. Like I said, defenses want to shade left. Let's roll out to the right. Let's make it so that Herbert doesn't have to throw across his body like that. Let's put him in a little more comfortable of a situation. But they did let him roll out a little bit, so that is what it is. Keandre Lambert-Smith had a good screen block. I can't believe how bad some of the pass blocking is. Obviously, we've talked about all the offensive line injuries, but early on, it really took the offensive line a while to get comfortable. And because of that, it took Herbert a while to get comfortable. Unsurprisingly, Herbert had another interception. And if you look at the play on Herbert's interception, there were only deep receivers, right? They only needed to get 12 yards, I believe, to get a first down, but everyone was at least 16 yards out. He had no good options. He didn't even have someone who was 6 yards out and maybe could get something done after the catch, or if nothing else, just make it so Herbert doesn't have to throw the ball away, or decide between that, taking a sack, and throwing the ball into coverage. And ultimately, he throws the ball into coverage, gets an interception. These are very avoidable if Herbert has closer options, not to mention it forces the defense to spread out a little bit. But have Kamani Vidal there, have Hampton there. They're really good after the catch. They turn back into running backs, and they're hard to slow down. And if nothing else, you give your punter better field position, right? Herbert said it in the post-game press conference, the worst thing that happens is not a punt, it's a turnover. And that's the play he was talking about. And I wish he would have more options in those situations. That doesn't mean the play isn't on Herbert. He still should throw the ball away instead of throwing it into coverage, but those shouldn't be his only options. I'll definitely have to look at the stats on this, but I thought that Jamari Sawyer did pretty well when he was on an island, especially on that Keandre Lambert-Smith touchdown in the back of the end zone. I thought Sawyer did a good job getting Herbert the time that he needed. Things were collapsing around Herbert, but it wasn't coming from the left tackle position, which is really reassuring. That's really good to see. Dre got his first touchdown. His second reception in the NFL was his first touchdown. Great throw over the top of coverage, and great job for him holding on to that ball. He took a big hit after. I was really happy with Keandre Lambert-Smith being able to get on the field, because Trey Harris goes down at one point and QJ is out, right? You need someone who can stretch the field a little bit, and that was who we were hoping that KLS could be, and it was really good to see him used in that way. All of these things, especially Rondé Gadsden getting more involved, they're going to help in the future, forcing defenses to get back into the, we have to cover everyone mentality. The last drive in the first half, that really saved the entire half in terms of the offense. Had they gone into the half with only 3 points or even 6 points, that would have felt pretty awful. They would have had to have a more aggressive game plan in the second half, and I don't know if that works out for them, especially having already given up 13 points in the first half, which isn't terrible. I think the Chiefs are really good on their opening drives. That's one of their strengths, but we'll talk about what the defense did in the second half, but giving up 13, yeah, that's kind of an average performance against the Chiefs offense, especially when you're dealing with that opening drive when they're in their bag and doing what they want to do. That lateral from Keenan, that could have been so good if he hadn't had to throw across the entire field all the way to the sideline on an off-foot throw to a guy with no blockers in front of him, no teammates anywhere near him. It sucked. That shouldn't have happened. At least give it to a younger player, right? Don't make Keenan put that on his shoulder. Give it to Trey Harris. Wasn't Trey Harris a quarterback at one point? I believe he was. Give it to Trey Harris for that. He might have been hurt at that point. I'm not sure, but that play was ridiculous. That's something that if you have Hampton a little bit farther from the sideline, a little closer to Keenan, maybe that can work. But again, you need 1 or 2 blockers going in that area so that Hampton has something to work with. He has a pillar in front of him to make a decision around, because that's where Hampton shines. Let him do something other than just open field with no momentum, because Keenan's throw was bad. When I say creative plays, that's not what I'm talking about. Let's not do that. That's not what I'm talking about. There were some misconnections with the Rondé Gadsden that didn't look great. Could just be a rookie thing, not quite on the same page as Herbert. We saw that change in the second half. So let's get to the second half offense. Finally seeing Keenan get involved in a good way. I appreciate that. Gotta keep the coverage thinking about Keenan Allen. Overall, it's probably best for the Chargers to not depend too heavily on Keenan, both in terms of predictability and in terms of, we don't know if he's back on the team next year. Let's get these younger players involved. I love seeing Ladd break tackles. It felt like Ladd had a couple plays where you're like, oh yeah, this is who he is. Right, this is what Ladd can do. I think that's going to be really important. I don't think the Chargers make it far in the postseason without Ladd playing his best. Scott Matlock overall is becoming a good fullback. Like I said, the pass protection could use some improvement. I liked his 2 receptions. I like him being a target. Obviously he looks unsure of himself out there, but anything they can do to spread the ball out in any way I think is really good. Obviously I wish he would just catch the ball and turn forward. I don't need to see Scott Matlock trying to juke guys. Not that that can never work, but I think as big and strong as he is, he can reliably get an extra 2 yards after the catch. That's a great option to me. And anytime you can target Scott Matlock, you're passing on a play that people expect you to run. Because Scott Matlock, at one point, when he was on the field, it was like, okay, we're running 80% of the time, which is obviously not a pattern that you can afford to keep up. So anything they can do to break that, I like it. I'm happy for him that he got that reception and was able to go for like 6 yards or something like that. Herbert finally connects with Gadsden on that rollout play. The way that ball was flying made me so nervous. Obviously, Herbert was hit as he was throwing, and he was trying to make that throw really fast. Kind of looked like Phillip Rivers out there, just, the quickest possible throwing motion, rather than his normal, very, very pretty throwing motion. Herbert gets to roll out, and suddenly he is able to connect with Gadsden. These rollout plays are good. They need to lean into that more. I think Herbert was having a tough time escaping the pocket, especially up the middle. Good defensive tackles are really hard to deal with. I'll be making a video on defensive tackles in the draft in the next 2 weeks, so look out for that. Members are going to get it a full week early. The offense overall looked better in the second half. I like all the shorter routes, the lesser depth of target for Herbert. Something we've talked about, his depth of target is way too high for his situation. Obviously, it's impressive on him that he can make these deep throws. I don't want him to have to when he's taking all these hits. Amari and Hampton looked a little better in the second half. In terms of dividing the snaps, they leaned way more into Kamani Vidal, which I think made sense. Kamani Vidal, he was the hotter hand this week, but it was good to see that Amari and Hampton finished with 61 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. He had a 26-yard run in there as well. I still wish they had more creative ways of running to the outside, but Hampton looks good. I think he's improving. They had some longer drives that got into like 7 minutes. I really like to see that. Keep the defense fresh, and the defense looked very fresh in the second half, which we'll get into in a second. But Herbert just looked a lot more comfortable in the second half. I think when he takes so many hits early, it just takes him time to get comfortable, and maybe he tries to force himself to be comfortable, and we see things like the interception. At some point, that's going to have to stop, but I think it's still good overall in terms of his performance. He finished with 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. In the first half, Mahomes looked like a much better quarterback than Herbert, so it was good to see Herbert step up when he was needed in the second half and flip that. He was still sacked 4 times, but for once, the other team's quarterback had to deal with more sacks than that, which you love to see. Trey Harris and Rondé Gadsden led the team in receiving. Harris got 3 receptions for 49 yards, Gadsden 4 for 61. I'm really glad to see the ball coming their ways. This was a big rookie day. After Gadsden didn't have the best start, I was worried that they just wouldn't go back to him, but, Herbert saw an opportunity, stepped up in the pocket, and fired a fastball to a Rondé Gadsden. So love to see that. Love to see the rookies get involved. KLS getting the touchdown. Like I said, it bodes well for the team's future for sure. I like the 6 lineman runs that they did, but other than that, the passing game was atrocious. Receivers not spreading out enough, running mesh way too much, but that's a conversation for next time. Now let's talk about the defense in the second half. Derwin James gave Rashee Rice a huge hit and just a brutal route. There was nothing Rashee Rice could have done. He has to have his head backwards so that he can make that catch. How many times week after week are, I don't know if it was really on Mahomes or if it's on Andy Reid. How many times are they going to set up Rashee Rice for that hit? That is a brutal thing to set up your teammate for, or your player for. He took hit after hit. It was really hard for him to bring the ball in, and that's just the effect of the defense playing really tough and physical. I saw it happen once with Derwin, happened another time with Jefferson. They let Rashee Rice take these huge hits, and it doesn't make sense. They have bigger guys than Rashee Rice. They could put Kelsey out there for that, but I don't know. I don't know why they're doing that to a receiver who's good enough to be their number 1 receiver rather than their tight end. But to the defensive line, Odafe Owe with 2 sacks. That's 7 on the year since coming to the Chargers. That's absolutely fantastic. Or is that 6 since joining the Chargers? 7 total, whatever. 7. He has fantastic pass rush moves. He also had 3 pressures, great performance. The defensive line did what they are supposed to do against a banged up and bruised Chiefs offensive line. Khalil Mack absorbing double teams on so many different plays. Obviously, he wasn't the one who got the sacks, but he did the dirty work, man. Just taking up these linemen and still pushing them back play after play. Tier Tart had some good run stops, same with Sean Hand. Khalil Mack, like I said, getting pressure. Everyone on this line has such an impressive motor, so relentless in pursuing Mahomes. We've seen Mahomes against so many teams just, if he can get outside the pocket, you're not going to be able to touch him. That was not the case today. Khalil Mack chased him to the sidelines so many times. What Odafe Owe offers is some real speed. I think for a long time, we got used to our faster rushers with pass rush moves in Joey Bosa. As soon as he got to the pocket, as soon as he gets to the center of the pocket, that's it. He has to get the sack then because, it's not that he's not going to try to chase down the quarterback. He's just not going to have the speed to get it done. So it was really cool to see the Chargers have a more complete defensive line in that sense. Deion Henley getting that interception is huge. I feel like he's doing a lot better mentally, it seems, than he was earlier this year, which makes me really happy. He said a while ago that this was the worst year of his life, after his brother got killed. So I'm really happy to see him do better because it looks like he's having fun out there, which is really good to see, really well deserved. 21 pressures on Mahomes is the most he has faced since 2023, a 42% pressure rate. Obviously, Mahomes had overall a really bad game. He had a couple flashes of good play, but I don't say that to say that he's not a good quarterback. The truth is Mahomes is the consensus overall over the years best quarterback in the league since Brady. And the year his offensive line is really bad, suddenly he's bad. Right? Suddenly he becomes an average quarterback. Keep that in mind when you judge Herbert's performance this year. The year that the offensive line is at its absolute worst, it's the worst in the league, it's the worst Herbert's dealt with, and that's saying something. Just happens to be the year that Herbert has his worst performances and, has all these interceptions and stuff. And hey, Herbert still has a very high ceiling and he still saves a bunch of games. It's almost like this is an offensive line problem, not a Herbert problem. So I just wanted to draw attention to that because that's a trend across all quarterbacks. When your offensive line is bad, quarterbacks get worse. And we're lucky that Herbert starts at such a high level so that when he gets worse, he is still an above average quarterback. I don't think you can say enough about what he's had to deal with. So I just wanted to bring the attention to that because when Mahomes has dealt with this level of pressure, yeah, he doesn't look very good. That's how it is. So I give Herbert a lot of credit for surviving out there. It's tough. We saw what happened to Mahomes. It's not easy taking hit after hit after hit and going into a game. Mahomes was banged up going into that game. He had been on the injury report for a couple weeks with a knee injury. He never had to miss practice, but usually when ACL tears happen like that, it means that the ACL was already kind of loosened in a sense, like it already was taking a lot of damage. I know way more than I would like to about ACL issues because I have had 2 ACL surgeries and it's just brutal. There is a technology where you can get some injections in your knee like preventatively, and the people who get it, I don't know that any of them have torn their ACL after. So there's interesting like preventative treatments out there that I think we're going to see more and more guys look into. ACL recoveries have gotten so much better even since I got the surgeries. And I remember in 2013-ish getting those surgeries, people a lot older than me were saying, oh, you're so lucky that you're getting it now, not 10 years ago, and they would show me the scars that would be a foot long on their knee all the way up through their thigh, where I got the tiniest little incisions. You have to imagine that he will be able to recover from that pretty well because technology's gotten a lot better. So back to the defense, Dante Thornton was wide open on 3rd and 16, and it sucks because, they didn't blitz. They had the guys out there. They had the numbers advantage out there. Mahomes just had time and had a guy, They got lucky with the illegal block penalty, but then it happened again. Tony Jefferson got a bad penalty on the hit. He just needed to put his shoulder first rather than his helmet, but the receiver dropped his body really quickly. So I don't know if realistically that's something they can really do. I think, I'm seeing a lot of defensive NFL players saying, yeah, you just can't really do anything about that. They have to penalize it because it's a helmet to helmet, and you want defensive players to have every incentive to try to stop it when they can, but it is what it is. Sometimes you hit the guy on the helmet. I thought him being ejected was really ridiculous. That, obviously didn't come from the refs on the field because the people who were there were like, yeah, it happened fast. It is what it is. But when all you see is the slow motion shot and the guy goes down and it happens to be the play where, someone can't get up right away, NFL refs in New York are, they're going to see this as a great opportunity to make the NFL look like it cares about its players, which it is extremely well documented that the NFL does not care about its players. And I don't know about you guys, I don't buy it at all. The NFL gets really mad when players play the game as it was meant to be played and in the way that makes it entertaining. We're there for the big hits, I think they were just taking advantage of a penalty on the field. Is what it is. Tony Jefferson is playing incredible this year. I'm very glad to see him play so well after coming out of retirement, after not making the roster right away. He's talked about how big of a motivator that was. And, he's been good in the run game. The Chiefs only got 49 total yards rushing, and some of that, I think 15 yards of that came from Mahomes. The defense no longer has a weakness against the run game. And that is so huge going into the playoffs where, it might be freezing temperatures like we're seeing. For whatever reason, this winter has been really cold, really snowy. I live in Chicago, so I love it. I get to see it every day. I was walking home from work yesterday and it was 5 degrees outside, it's brutal conditions to play in. So a run defense is really important. On that last drive, I did not like to see Kelsey not covered man-to-man on 3rd and 7. It's third down. It's like not covering Keenan Allen. It's like, yeah, of course that's where they're targeting it, especially with a backup quarterback in. So they essentially gave Gardner Minshew a freebie there. And they did learn their lesson, though, because Kelsey was covered that next play. Gardner Minshew did not, he made one head movement to look towards someone else, but it was really clear, to me at least, where he was throwing that whole time. So absolutely love to see Derwin James getting to be the one that ends that game. That felt very fitting. I feel really good about this defense in the fourth quarter. You know, I don't always feel good about them on opening drives, don't always feel good about them in the second and third quarter, you know, but when the moment heats up, they are at their best. They pretty much neutralized Xavier Worthy. He only caught 2 out of 4 targets for less than 20 yards. You know, it's probably why he wanted to get in a fight so badly, was so he could contribute something. Being able to take Xavier Worthy out of the game like that is really important, you know, because he's the speedy stretch the field guy. So they held one of the best red zone offenses in the league to a field goal twice. They didn't allow a passing touchdown at all. That's not an easy thing to do against Mahomes. I'm really happy with how this defense played, and overall, the Chargers are winning these ugly games. You know, their playoff chances have increased to over 90%. Some places are saying 95%. I couldn't be happier with that. You know, earlier this year, I talked about how Jesse Minter has become a less desirable head coaching candidate. Things aren't consistent. His team isn't playing with the same physicality. He has completely flipped that around since the bye. I'm astounded at the adjustments that they've been able to make. And, you know, it also comes down to the team leaders. You know, Derwin looks back to form. Khalil Mack looks like no one is going to stop him, even with double teams. You know, Thule is playing better than he ever has. The safeties play solid despite being down some players. Obviously, Marcus Williams didn't play great. He's a practice squad guy. He was, you know, only just called up. And when you have Molden go down, you have RJ Mickens go down, yeah, you're gonna have some missed cues, but I think overall the secondary held up really well anyways. And now they have the week to kind of figure it out. You know, we don't know if RJ Mickens or Elijah Molden will be back. You know, I would guess Elijah Molden has a shot of being back, but didn't look good with RJ Mickens. So I'm curious to see how they're able to handle that. But I trust Jesse Minter. You know, I trust him in that situation. So I think Jesse Minter is right back in that conversation as one of the most desirable head coaching candidates, unfortunately, for the Chargers, right? I don't think Michigan's going to hire him, though. So that's at least something. The run defense was great. You can't run up the middle against the Chargers, which is so important going into the playoffs. And I talked in the preview show about how the Chargers and Chiefs are both teams that arguably get too many penalties, you know? And ultimately, the Chiefs got 9, the Chargers got 5. The Chargers had 34 total minutes of possession. The defense played fast, physical all day. And it's hardball football, right? You know, slow, methodical drives, running the ball, fast, ugly, close, defense heavy, to not allow any points in the second half. Yeah, that's an incredible performance. So I'm really happy with how the Chargers played. I cannot believe we're at double-digit wins. Obviously, this is the hardest part of the season, so to knock off the Eagles and the Chiefs is so huge going into these next tough games. I do think they have a real shot against the Cowboys. I think it's really important that they win next week because the Broncos and the Texans look really, really tough, especially the Broncos. You know, you saw that win against the Packers. Obviously, the Packers, they lose Micah Parsons, and, you know, I don't think they're the best team in the NFC, but, you know, they're in that mix. You know, we saw them take down the Bears, and, you know, maybe the Bears can beat them next week. I certainly hope so. The Broncos are going to be tough, so I think it's really, really important that the Chargers get a win next week against Dallas. It was awesome to see Phillip Rivers out there. I love that he scored a touchdown. Obviously, he couldn't come away with the win, but he had some plays where you're like, oh, right, this is how you read a defense, right? He plays at such a high level. He's so good at reading these DBs and stuff. It's so cool, you know, and obviously he's been locked into that offense for years as a coach, but it was so cool to see like his players having a watch party at home and cheering for him so hard. That was so cool, and really glad that I get to watch Phillip Rivers play as an adult because I really didn't get to see that too much. I mean, I guess, you know, he played in 2020 and I was 21 years old. So I guess technically I got to see him a little bit, but not a whole lot. So that was really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing him play in the future. I really wish that the Colts and Chargers could have played at this point in the season instead of earlier. I think a Rivers versus Herbert game would have been awesome. It doesn't look like the Colts are likely to make the playoffs. And so We're not going to be able to see that in the postseason, although that would have been awesome too. But yeah, great weekend for Chargers fans. That was really cool. If you get a chance, watch every Phillip Rivers press conference. You know, he gets emotional in all of them. He's so passionate. It's so cool. And obviously Chargers fans, I'm sure are all temporary Colts fans, at least for Phillip Rivers. You know, I hope he can get a passing touchdown in all of his appearances. All right, that's going to do it for me. Like I said, I'll be back sometime in the next couple weeks with a defensive tackles video. Instead of going over the top 5, I'm going to be going over the top 10 because it's a really deep and exciting class. I'll be back in a few days to preview the Cowboys game. Please like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen today. I'm so excited for where the Chargers are and how much they've overcome. This is a really exciting season. You know, however it ends, I think the Chargers are going to have a lot to be proud of, and I think Harbaugh has solidified himself as one of the best coaches in the NFL after this performance. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys next time.